So it may or may not be live. Still working with some technical difficulties, so bear with me here. Oh, I think we're. Oh, I think we're there. Okay. All right. So hopefully this one actually works. I adjusted some settings, and everything should be good now. Okay, so Anthony, I think the stream cut out before I answered your question, actually. So I'll show it again. So these are the plans for this project, and so you can see here that it's I basically go through and I do a full set of plans. It's the same stuff you'll see on my website at the end of the project. And so basically all I'm doing here is I just go through in as much detail as possible. I do all my designing in SketchUp. I never got good at drawing, so I just do all my design in SketchUp. And I just build a full set of plans with absolutely every little detail I could possibly think I might need. And yeah, it's very straightforward. Again, this works for my brain. I know some people can come up with a drawing and just go from there, but for me, I need every little number in there. I need absolutely everything fully planned out. So yeah, I mean, on this one, this is also a very complicated project because I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but I'm going to be including some LED wiring in that all throughout it. So like in our shelf components here, I've got like specific slot sizes in that for like where I'm going to be running the LEDs and all that. Very complicated, and this is just the way I like to approach things. I also include a cut list in the bottom, just that way, again, very quick reference for when I'm sizing things out. I want to make sure that everything is coming out to the sizes that I expect it to be. So having this cut list here just makes things that much easier for me. All right, it looks like we actually got some people here. So anyway, yeah, so this is the template for the stained glass here. I got to make sure I don't mix things up. I can make sure I get everything in the right order. That should be it. And so yeah, maybe something like that. Luckily, everything here is symmetrical, so if things don't line up perfectly, I should be able to figure that out pretty easily, and it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But yeah, so one of the things I found really interesting about this when I started with the stained glass stuff is that trying to get this big of a printout is kind of challenging unless you have like a large format printer. But what you can do using like any of the Adobe software in that is you do what's called a poster print. And so you can see here how you get on these corners here, like the top corner on that, you end up with just these little cut marks in that, and that allows you to print something as big as this window while printing it over multiple pages. And the printer will do all the scaling and all the sizing for you. I remember when I started trying to figure this out, I was trying to do all that sizing and that myself in Illustrator. Absolute nightmare. So yeah, just letting Adobe do it for you makes things a heck of a lot easier. And yeah, now it's just a matter of trying to go through and line things up, get things cut out to as accurate as possible. Because yeah, these are a full life-size example of what the windows are going to be. And if I get really quiet during the stream, I do apologize for that. I tend to get very quiet when I start to think. And, well, I'm not used to live streaming because everything I know about live streaming is that you have to be, like, very excited, very loud and rambunctious to get in order to get people interested in what you're doing. And that's not really my personality. So we're going to kind of see how things go. If you guys are enjoying the stream, make sure you let me know because if you want to see them more often. Because, yeah, I kind of like to do this every once in a while. I think it's a fun way to kind of connect with you guys a little bit better than I do normally. Kind of better than putting out only one video a month like I normally do. So yeah, I figured the streams might be kind of a fun way to, I don't know, show you guys a little bit more behind the scenes of the project. Yes, so to answer your question, Anthony, I use Adobe for absolutely everything. I went to school for graphic design, and in that, they taught me how to use the full Adobe suite for basically everything from photo editing to video to audio engineering in like Adobe Audition. So yeah, I pay every month. I get to pay that lovely. I think it's like $80 or something for the full Adobe suite. And sadly, I don't know any other way to do most of the stuff that I do, just digital wise. So yeah, I use Adobe for everything, and I have found even with like the woodworking stuff, sometimes like Illustrator is really good. You know, if you know how to work with Illustrator, it's because it's a little bit of a different way of thinking compared to like SketchUp. So having Illustrator is really nice, but yeah, you don't really need the full Adobe suite for most stuff, but yeah, definitely I do everything in there now because it's the way I learned, and I'm just kind of stuck doing it that way. And I'll admit this part that the one thing that is very good to know about stained glass, if you're interested in getting into it, is that it is one of the more tedious things. You know, in woodworking, you know, we do a lot of tedious stuff like I don't know, you know, things like cutting dovetails. That can get pretty tedious. But the thing with stained glass is it's a very time consuming craft, but the results kind of speak for themselves. I mean, even on that last cabinet where that was my first time actually putting like a stained glass window into a project, that really made it all the difference for me. I absolutely love the way that thing came out. Although it's not perfect, you know, it's one of those things. Just adding in that extra material in there, you know, that for me, that anyway, that's something that I've always loved doing. So now that we've got everything trimmed out to our lines, we got to try and try and line things up. And once I get everything lined up, I'll show you guys a little bit closer up, hopefully, if I can with the camera, of what these actually, like what the stained glass patterns actually look like. Because again, this is something that took me a little while to figure out. I'm doing something different on this project where I actually fully designed the windows in SketchUp. So all of the windows in that are an actual 3D model. So it made a little bit more sense in my brain, but yeah, it was a little bit more complicated, but made more sense to me anyway. And then the idea here is that there's basically two different lines that I'm following. So one set of lines is for the actual glass pieces. The other set of lines is for the zinc that we're going to be cutting up tonight. And it should be just like that. All right. And yeah, I'd highly recommend if you guys are interested in stained glass. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, there's definitely a learning curve to it. Like you have to kind of commit to it, and it's you know, depending on how intense you want to get with it, it can be pretty expensive. But you know, starting cost for me, I think, you know, realistically speaking, the glass and the actual zinc itself is going to be the most expensive part. Things like, you can't really see it on camera, but I got like my little circular saw thing behind me here on the bench. You know, that thing was, I think, 80 bucks. The soldering iron was about, I think it was like 120 bucks. So, you know, it's not a cheap thing to get into, but I mean, compared to woodworking, like, I mean, I got a $1,500 bandsaw sitting right there, right? Compared to woodworking, you know, getting into stained glass it's fairly inexpensive overall. The only thing you really got to be careful of with stained glass is making sure you take advice from, you know, or finding the right advice for what you want to do. Because again, I think I explained this in the last video. Because I'm working with zinc, you know, because I want to work with zinc, I don't want to touch lead. That's quite a bit, you know, quite a big difference. You know, there's a lot of different technicalities between the zinc and the lead and all that. You know, well, not really that big, but yeah, you know, your soldering is slightly different. And it also doesn't help that I'm using lead-free solder because basically everything, you know, all the resources you're going to find about stained glass, it's always you know, they're always talking about lead. And for me, honestly, I don't know how people are still working with lead. I just, you know, it'll never make sense to me, but, you know, I'll let people make up their own decisions on how they want to live their lives. But yeah, again, lead is one of those things that, you know, for me, that was a complete non-starter when it came to doing stained glass. I knew that I wanted to work with stained glass, but I also knew that I just didn't want to deal with having lead in the shop and that. And especially, I think the biggest thing is you know, looking forward into the future, you know, lead pipes and that getting banned, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if in, you know, 10, 20 years, you know, any piece of furniture that has leaded glass in it, that gets, you know, outlawed by some government agency or something. So it's just one of those things. It's a little bit of future proofing on, you know, my own furniture pieces. You know, I wouldn't want to have to rip the windows out and that and try and replace them in the future. You know, just stuff like that. So it's one of those things. Again, if you're interested, definitely, you know, take some time, do some research. It's really not a hard thing to get into. Again, I'm no professional at it, but you know, I've learned a thing or two. And so you can see there, that is exactly what the window is going to look like. So it's a nice long window. We've got a nice diamond shape in here. This is going to be very interesting to try and fit up this piece here. So kind of excited to try that. I don't quite know how well I'm going to do, but again, this is another thing that I learned about the stained glass, specifically using the stuff that I'm using here. So this is the metal that we're using here. So it's called cane. So this is zinc cane, and this is an H channel one. So you got the groove on both sides. And basically what you do is you just slot the glass in there. And as long as your glass edges don't need to be absolutely perfect, as long as you don't have any like large broken off sections of that are sticking out past where this groove will cover up, you can actually get a really, you know, it's really nice, or it's really easy to get nice clean lines in that. So compared to the copper foil method, which is kind of your other typical method for making stained glass, yeah, this is definitely a lot easier. And you might want to close your eyes for a second. I'm just going to adjust the camera here so you guys are actually looking at something rather than just looking at the workbench here. There we go. Maybe? No, not quite. Okay. There we go. Yeah, I gotta figure out the whole thing with the live streaming. You know, it's something I've wanted to do for a while because I think it's a cool way to connect. But yeah, it's, you know, I'm a bit of an introvert. I know a lot of people. I get comments all the time, you know, or like comments and emails and that. People think that I'm like super, you know, super extroverted person. You know, I'm about as quiet and shy of a person as you'd ever probably know. And anyone who knows me, you know, off the internet can probably attest to that. But you know, I figure if the live streaming lets me show off some of the cooler stuff that I'm doing in the background, you know, it might be a good way to, I don't know. It's an interesting thing to try, as always. I'm all about trying new things, expanding my my own knowledge base and whatnot. Yes, the glass is very expensive. If you think walnut is expensive, just wait till you look in the glass. Well, let me just finish taping this off, and I'll show you guys what I'll be working with. Because I don't think we're gonna get to the glass tonight because doing all the zinc cutting in that takes forever. Not forever, but anyway. So I'll show you the first piece here. So this is piece number one. It's kind of hard to see. So it's a very dark gray, which, you know, compared to the clear one, I promise it is dark gray. I know it looks clear, but this one is $31 a square foot. So that's, like I said, that gets very expensive very quickly. So this is why this is just gonna be kind of our details area, and I did end up buying an extra square foot that I probably won't need, but you know, it's better to have it and not need it. But yeah, anyway, the reason that this one is actually fairly expensive, and this is one of the more, from what I understand anyway, this is one of the more expensive stained glass, because this is what's called water rolled. So you can see how we've got that nice wavy texture in there. So just the way that this glass is made makes it a little bit more expensive. So $30, and again, this is all Canadian. $30 is kind of your higher end. I did see some at the store that are like really fancy glasses that go up to like $40, which is kind of ridiculous. But for the most part, the glass is around, you know, $20 to $25. But you can also find really cheap stuff, which I'll show you guys the clear stuff that I got too. So this is the clear stuff. So again, you can see how it's pretty much clear, except it's got that little bit, you know, just a little bit of texture to it. So I believe this is, I forget what it's called, rough rolled. So whatever technicality that means in the glass world. Anyway, this is only, I believe, $13.50 a square foot. So again, slightly cheaper, but you know, a little less than half the price of that other one. But you know, your clear glasses and that are always going to be slightly cheaper. So if you really want to, or like that's where I'd always recommend starting if you want to deal with the stained glass stuff. Start by just buying clear glass. You can even go to like larger glass stores, and all you're doing is just buying 1/8 inch or I believe 3mm glass, something I don't know, 1/8 inch glass. You want 1/8 inch thick glass in order to work with the zinc and the lead or whatever, and then you can buy that for super cheap from like an actual glass store. If you go to like a specialty stained glass store like I've been going to, even your clear glass is fairly expensive. But yeah, the real benefit here though for me is being able to buy glass like this. Like again, we got that little bit of texture in there that just helps break things up, makes things look a little bit more interesting. So that's kind of the thing for me, is I just wanted, you know, this is the kind of stuff that I want to work with. If I wanted to work with clear glass, you can probably get it for a little bit cheaper. And looking around on like Reddit and that, I have found people talk about how you can take like old windows and that, like you can find stuff on like Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, whatever, and you can actually take these old glass windows, break them down, and use them in your own stuff. You know, that it theoretically works, but you know, it's one of those things where it's, you know, you run the risk of, if the glass is really old, it might be a little more fragile. Again, I don't know that much about glass, and I find it easier to just be able to buy what I want. So, you know, it's one of those things. You can get it very cheap, or you can get, you know, spend money and get some of the slightly nicer stuff. Again, I'm still fairly new to this, but yeah, well, I will hopefully have more information on this in the future. This whole stained glass thing is something that I really want to pursue a lot more, because it's just, yeah. I've got this idea for a cabinet, which, you know, I haven't actually run this idea by anyone. You know, I haven't talked to like any of my woodworking buddies or anything like that. But basically, it's just this like giant cabinet, and then it's got like these amazing, like the idea in my brain is very cool, but it's got these like big stained glass windows on the side, and it's a very similar idea to this cabinet that I'm building now, where the purpose of the cabinet would be to like light up a room. Yeah, I still got to work out some of the kinks in the design in that. It's going to be an interesting one if it ever does actually come to fruition, because I was originally planning to build it out of Macor, but as I have now learned, Macor can be a bit of a pain in the butt to work with, so that might change. But yeah, overall, the whole stained glass thing, it's definitely something that's going to be happening a lot more often as I kind of continue on with my woodworking stuff. And every once in a while you rip the template, and luckily again, these templates, they don't need to be absolutely perfect, because I have two of them for like these two side windows that I'm doing. It's really not a big deal, as long as you can kind of guess where the lines are and I make sure everything is kind of lining up straight. It's one of those things where I try not to stress too much about it, but you want to make them as good as possible so that things are actually accurate when you're sizing things up. And you don't want to mix up where the things are going. Oh, that's by far the hardest part I found about this, is that it's very easy to screw up with the stained glass because, you know, again, unlike wood, you can't like write numbers on it and then easily sand that off to, you know, keep track of what you're doing. You gotta be very, very accurate and very careful with your placement and whatnot.
How's it going?
Unexpected company. Oh yeah, I think I know what style you're talking about there, Anthony, with the Japanese style lamps. Yeah, I know that. I forget what the specific style. I know. Man, what is that now? Green and Green. I know that they're very, you know, Green and Green is very popular for like their lamps and that. But yeah, I think I know what you're talking about with the Japanese style. So there's a lot of stuff I want to look into. Again, everything to do with stained glass. The biggest thing I learned about stained glass is that you want to involve light somehow, whether you're like doing a window or something, or like even if you just want to use it in a cabinet, you want to have something in there that's light enough that actually, like, you know, like if you have like books and that inside the cabinet that the light can bounce off of, stuff like that. You know, there's different ways you can go about making the stained glass actually look more interesting. So yeah. Anything, but yeah, the big thing is that you need some form of light in order to actually make the stained glass look half decent. So one of those hard lessons that kind of has to be learned by actually using the stuff. And the other big thing here, because this is a lesson I'm currently having to kind of annoyingly learn, when you're printing out your template, use like a heavier weight cardstock. Like I think I don't know, the last one I did, that was a heavier. Like I forget the actual weight of the paper, but anyway, yeah, use like a cardstock when you're printing it out, because this is the stuff I'm using here is just light printer paper. I had to grab this because I ran out of the cardstock, and what I'm kind of worried about, because when you're using like the flux and all that, I'm worried that this paper is going to kind of dissolve on me, but and this is definitely a lot more annoying to cut in that. So definitely, if you are going to try doing this, make sure you get yourself some cardstock, because that'll kind of help you just make things a little bit cleaner and whatnot. Wow. This is the most people I've ever had on a live stream. I'm kind of impressed. I think the last time I tried to do a live stream, it was like last summer or something when I was carving a paddler. So, I don't know, something like that. But yeah, I remember sitting there for like an hour and a half working on that live stream, and it was like 0 people. This time there's like 8 people. That's great. Again, I know it's very, like, I know some people like live streams. I know some people don't. You know, it is what it is. Again, something I want to experiment with. If it's something, you know, if it doesn't really, you know, not a whole lot of people like watching the live streams, then I might just continue focusing, but they might happen every once in a while still. Now, the other problem that I'm probably going to run into with doing these windows at the same time is on the last one, it was pretty easy because the windows were, you know, small enough that I could fit both of them on the workbench. Whereas here, I'm going to run out of room really quickly. So I'm going to have to try and get creative with, you know, my placement and whatnot, and make sure I still have room to actually work on things. One of the things I would definitely do in like a future shop setup or something, you know, someday when I have more space and whatnot, I would definitely have like a dedicated like stained glass area, because not only is this very messy, like when you start doing like the cementing and that, you know, this becomes an absolute disaster to try and, you know, keep things, you know, keep your area clean and whatnot. So yeah, having like a dedicated stained glass area would make life a heck of a lot easier, because yeah, just keeping this stuff a little bit more controlled. And not having to lose, like, this is the other annoying part, is I'm going to lose the workbench for a little while anyway, so the reason that I'm starting on these windows right now is because, like, again, like I learned on the last project, these windows take a lot of time of just sitting. So there's the whole part that I'm doing right now where I need to get the windows together, or like I need to get the zinc cut, I need to get the glass fitted up, I need to solder them, but then once I solder them, I have to then go through and I apply a cement, which is basically just a lime powder and linseed oil mixture. And then once that cement, you know, as woodworkers, we all know that just raw linseed oil or boiled linseed oil does take a while to dry. So you got to wait for that cement to dry for like 4 or 5 days. Let that get fully cured up. Then you have to go back in and polish the glass. Then you have to go through and apply the patina. Let the patina fully dry up. Then you can wax it. Then you want to let the wax dry. All around, yeah, the stained glass. There's a lot of just sitting time with it compared to, like, you know. Again, a lot of woodworking, you know, I only really have woodworking to compare this stuff to, but yeah, in the woodworking that, you know, there's not a whole lot of downtime. Like, I can be working on one part of the project, then I can jump over to another part of the project, you know, little stuff like that. So, again, I'm trying to learn as much as I can about the stained glass stuff, but it definitely is a much more challenging thing to kind of self-teach yourself. I will keep that in mind, John. I'm trying very hard to kind of keep topics in my head of like stuff to talk about when it comes to, you know, what I'm working on. Just trying to explain what I'm doing, because, you know, it's not like you know, I've watched in the past. I've watched some like video game live streams and that. You know, I'm not a huge gamer, but you know, I've tried watching some of that stuff, and you know that, you know, they're usually talking about the games. I don't think I've ever actually watched, you know, like woodworkers or anything like that, or anyone like that doing live streams. So. Trying to learn along the way, and yeah, it's just a matter of just rambling on about whatever I can possibly think of. There we go. through the magic of live streaming, I guess, we're now ready to move on to actually cutting the zinc. So I'm going to try and get both of my templates laid out here. I might have to bash some things around. Gently do that. Okay. Because, yeah, the hardest thing, you're also dealing with a lot of, like, long, fragile stuff. Like, each of these pieces of zinc, they cost about, like, I think it was $8 a piece for the 6 foot length. And it does, you know, the zinc is a little bit stiffer than the lead, but you do have to worry about it getting bent and whatnot. So you got to be very careful where you actually put this stuff down. So luckily I've got, you can kind of see in the back behind me, back behind the bandsaw there, I've got some like lumber racks in that, and I just keep the pieces laid out on some kind of those up there, on that MDF stuff up there, so they stay fairly flat, but you know, it's still a bit of a challenge. So we'll try and get these lined up so that I got as much space as I can get. Trim off as much of the excess as I can on here. And again, it's nice because these windows are fully symmetrical, like there's no top or bottom, so I just have to try and get these things laid out in whatever way I can so that we can actually have room on the bench to work on them. Might just sneak both of them on, run some tape down the middle, and that should both fit, theoretically. Alright. And then to make sure that my templates aren't sliding around, I like to use tuck tape, because if you guys have never used this stuff before, it's for like taping like the insulation out in your house, or like for vapor barrier and that, and it's this like super sticky stuff, and it'll stick to anything. Like if you have a little bit of wood dust on your bench, it's not going to care. And I so far haven't had any problems with it around like the flux and that. It seems to hold just fine, so I like to just use a generous amount of it. Because, yeah, the last thing you want is for your templates to be moving around at all. You want them as locked down as absolutely possible. So we got both templates on here. I'll bring the camera and show you guys a little bit closer up what we're dealing with. There we go. So you can see here, this is going to be the design for our two side windows. The front window that's going to be on the door, same idea, but it's a little bit shorter and a little bit wider in order to fit in the door. Again, the big thing with the design of this project is I had to make sure to kind of balance everything out, so make sure that our windows were kind of even overall. But the big thing here is we're just using this like diamond design, and then so the clear glass we're going to be running around the perimeter here, and then making the big portion here, and then the two portions here, and then the black is going to be this kind of inside perimeter as well as these two chevrons on either side. So the idea here is to keep this glass, or to keep these windows kind of as simple as possible so that a lot of light can shine through, but also add in a little bit of detail. Just, again, that's the big thing with the stained glass. You know, the reason you want to do this rather than just putting in a piece of glass in your, in your cabinet, in your doors, whatever, because this has a lot of very intricate details in that to it. So things like putting these zinc line, or having this dark zinc running everywhere through your window, personally, I think that looks really cool. So now that we have these templates laid out, all I'm doing is just cutting pieces to fit in here. So again, very, very tedious. It's just a matter of, actually taking my piece. I try not to measure that much. Things like my border pieces, those I can measure pretty easily. But then once I get my border pieces in here, I can hold them in with some nails and whatnot. And then I can actually go through and kind of fit up these pieces. Because the really nice thing about stained glass is because it's an additive form of joinery, because you're adding that solder to the joint in order to hold each of the pieces together, you end up not needing absolutely perfect joinery anyway. And so then when it comes to actually cutting the zinc, again, I showed this in the video, but I just used this little, I think it's called like a hobby saw or something. You can buy them at Harbor Freight. I bought mine on Amazon because I don't think we even have a Harbor Freight in Canada. But, oh geez, talking too much. Anyway, the plan, or the whole reason you want to use a saw like this is because with the zinc, it's a very hard metal. So you can't actually cut it like, I think with lead you usually use like a knife or like a pair of small metal snips or whatever. But with the zinc, you actually need a saw that'll cut it. You can also use a hacksaw on like a miter box or something. But from everything I found, this is the easier option, and for for $70, it's really not that expensive. Plus, this thing wins as being just about the cutest tool I have in my shop. Like, there's not a lot of tools that I would consider cute. This thing is, but it is also the most likely tool to take a finger. Because the way that it works is you've just got this little switch. So it's either on or off. It's not like a miter saw where you like hold it and then as soon as you take your hand off. So you do have to be very careful with it. But again, for $80, you can't really expect too many safety concerns. But it does have like a little vise and everything on it, so it does hold everything very securely, and it does give you pretty accurate alignment and whatnot. And if that sounds absolutely horrible on the stream, please tell me, and I'll try and drop the mic or something when I do the cutting, because yeah, I can't imagine it sounds great, but I also it can't be too bad. I'm hoping anyway. And then yeah, so it really is just a case of I might grab my tape measure here. But again, for the most part, all I'm doing is I'm just basing everything off of my actual, like, real size plans here, rather than trying to take measurements now. Because realistically, with these windows, it doesn't matter what size they are. As long as they fit inside the rabbet that I cut, which is, when I'm designing the windows, basically I'll take the opening that I have. I wish I had the door out here. It's somewhere inside. Let's see. So I'll bring the actual cabinet over here. So we've got the rabbet on the inside face here. You can kind of see it there. Let me see if I can bring the camera in to make it make more sense. Okay, that's about as good as I can do it. So you can see in here I've got this rabbet that goes around all 4 of these inside pieces. So I have that rabbet, I take the measurements of that rabbet, and then when I'm designing my windows, I basically just take a 1/16 off all 4 sides, so a 1/8 of an inch total. And that gives me enough wiggle room and whatnot, and I like doing that because the thing that I know with the windows is once they're all put together, I cannot adjust the size of that. Whereas I can kind of adjust the size of the rabbet, again, with the woodworking skills that I have, I know that if I need to, I can make this rabbet larger. But I'd rather not. So I know that it's much easier to kind of pack in that little 1/16 of an inch of material, or, you know, not pack in material, right? If I make the windows a little bit too large, I know that they'll still fit in there, which is kind of the important part of this whole thing. So it's really just a matter of, you know, kind of taking your best guess, but always, you want to make your rabbet slightly oversized if you can, and make your windows slightly undersized. That way, again, if you have to add a little bit of filler pieces in there to make sure that things are sitting where you want the window to sit, that's way preferable than trying to, you know, going to fit your window in and it doesn't fit in the rabbet that you have. So yeah, that's one of those things. Luckily I thought about that before I started doing the stained glass stuff. I didn't think, you know, I didn't have to learn that the hard way. But again, it's one of those things you really got to think about the process before you get into it. Just make sure you think about things, which again, I tend not to, but I like to give advice that I don't follow myself. And it looks like we got some comments rolling in. I promise I'm keeping my eye on it. It's just kind of hard to keep track of everything at the same time. Especially when my phone does not want to cooperate. 2 seconds. Let me check it on the computer. Okay, so to answer your question, how I learned about the stained glass stuff, honestly, I made it up as I went along. Actually, I'll adjust the camera here so we're a little bit more in a normal spot. So yeah, the thing with the stained glass, and I'll bring the mic over because, yeah, there we go. Let's see if that is that. Let me know if that sounds better because now the mic is actually somewhat closer. Again, I'm working out the kinks with the live streaming. I apologize in advance. So where I started learning about the stained glass, if you look like a lot of the traditional stuff, you'll see like leaded, people talk about leaded glass and that. So I saw that and I figured that there had to be some other method for doing that same thing. So from there, I kind of stumbled upon the copper foil method of stained glass, which is, yeah, again, it's a really weird, it's a really annoying way of working because you basically take each piece of glass, wrap this copper foil around it, and then you have to solder everything, and the soldering is an absolute nightmare. So I learned about that. I tried playing around with that, and it just didn't work. I couldn't get the soldering the soldering stuff to work. So then I went back and kept kind of running down these different rabbit holes because that's, for me, that's the thing that I found, even though that's the way I learned woodworking, is I didn't look at woodworking and go, I want to build X piece of furniture, here's how you build X piece of furniture. I kind of went and started with one thing, and then that kind of led me to another thing. So with the stained glass, I went and I figured out how you do the copper foil method, and I realized, okay, that's not going to work. Here's this other method working with this, you know, the solid metal stuff. That seems to be what I actually want, you know, that seems to be the way that people are doing the stuff that I want to do. So from there, I then went and figured out, okay, everyone here is talking about working with lead. Well, I refuse to work with lead, so let's see what else I can find out there. And it really took diving down the rabbit hole. Like, I had to go through, and basically how I ended up finding out about the zinc is I was on this one random website. Somebody said something about using this zinc for just using it as a border around your normal, like, stained glass pieces, because that's, in the stained glass world, that's what zinc is used for. People don't, what I'm doing with the zinc is not normal, but basically what you use the zinc for is use it to make a border. So when I heard about that, I thought, okay, well, if you can use it to make the border, why can't you use it to make the rest of the window, to make it, you know, just so that way I don't have to work with lead. And eventually, again, through doing a little bit of research, I found this place out in BC that sold the H channel. Then one of the times when I was at the stained glass store that I've been going to, I asked them if they had it, and they just happened to have the same stuff that I was looking for. And that's basically how I've just kind of stumbled upon to where I am. But that's the big thing, is you got to kind of figure out what you want to achieve with whatever it is, whether it's woodworking, stained glass, whatever it is. Figure out kind of the end result that you want, and then from there you can kind of piece together the results, you know, in different ways. Again, I have a very weird way of learning things. I very much so like to teach myself. I don't like learning from other people a lot. Like, things like YouTube videos are different, but if I had to actually be in a classroom with somebody teaching me how to do these things, I would never learn how to do it, because the thing for me is I like actually messing around with things. So when I actually went out and bought the Zinc, I bought the saw, and I actually got to work making the windows, I found that it was very different than trying to learn how to do it. So if that makes sense. And I hope that answered your question, because yeah, it's kind of, I'm not great at explaining that, because everyone who I try to explain this kind of stuff to, they think I'm crazy, because I try to, when I want to pick up a new skill, I kind of dive down the rabbit hole, and I tend to spend a lot of money investing in that skill while I'm trying to learn it. So yeah, it's a weird way of working. It also allows me to get a lot of weird random stuff that I never would have thought, like all my leatherworking stuff. Leatherworking is still something I really want to get back into. Eventually it's something I'll try and figure out, but the thing, kind of the reason I stopped doing that is because it wasn't super practical. I don't need like handbags or totes or backpacks. I might make myself a nice apron someday, but leatherworking just didn't seem to be a practical thing for me to try and actually take the time to learn, if that makes sense. Same thing, I think there was also knife making for a little while. That was another one of those kind of like weird side hobbies. I thought that would be super cool. I thought I'd be able to make like some marking knives and that. Again, something I want to get back into, but it's, without kind of a dedicated space, there's just too much, setup and tear down, and yeah, it was just not really a fun thing to deal with. But anyway, got our first piece laid out here. And so just like a normal miter saw, I'm just gonna line up my blade with my line and just go cutting away. And if you're wondering why I'm not wearing a mask when I'm dealing with that, it shoots everything back. The particles are heavy enough, I'm not too worried about it. I know that somebody's going to lecture me at some point in time in some video in comment section somewhere that I should be wearing a respirator. I probably should, but I don't know. It's fine. It's fine. I'm all for, I'm a big component of, a big supporter of safety in the shop, but, there's only so much time I can spend wearing a mask in the day where it's, it's kind of a reasonable time to be wearing a mask. So, we're just gonna leave it there. The one time you do really want to be wearing a mask when dealing with the stained glass is anytime you're soldering them. That is one of those times where, I thought it might be cool to do the live stream stuff while I was soldering. Then I realized I was going to be wearing a full respirator the whole time, and that just, all you'd hear is just kind of a garbled thing. I might still do a live stream or like just put some video on or something, just so if you want to watch me sit there and solder stuff for a while. But again, the thing that I think is the most important about, the whole working with the Zinc and that is, like, the best part about it is just the fact that it doesn't really matter. Like, the thing with, like, woodworking is if you have, if I have these two vertical pieces in woodworking, I need them to be the exact same size, and I'd take them over to my shooting board and I'd get, I'd dial that in, that length and that, and, I'd try to get them absolutely perfect. Whereas with the stained glass here, as long as they're close, again, the whole, this part, especially this part with the board, this half-inch board that I'm using, you're never going to see it. It's going to be inside that rabbet. So even if, like, my joint here is, like, off slightly in that, it's not going to matter. So that's one of those things. It's really, the big thing here, again, this is the same thing, stained glass, woodworking, whatever craft it is that you're doing. The biggest thing to learn is where you can take things a little bit more relaxed and where you need to focus on things. Because what I found is if I try to focus like really deeply and like try to do absolutely everything perfect on every part of a project, everything comes out kind of mediocre. But if I really am good, like if I do a really, really good job on like the front face of a project, this and the sides or the back are not as good, or the inside area of the project is not as good, that's fine by me, because I'm saving the time on that inside portion, but then doing a really good job on the outside. So it's kind of, just kind of comes down to picking your battles, honestly. The one thing I am going to have to try and watch out for is, okay, those are annoying me. Anyway. I was trying to use those to monitor what was going on in the stream and that, but it's too distracting. So the one thing I'm gonna have to really watch out for when I'm on this time, because because I've had this zinc sitting in the shop for since I did the last project, there is a little bit of sawdust buildup on them, and I'm kind of concerned that might cause some issues with soldering. So I'm gonna kind of scrub this stuff as much as I possibly can, get all that sawdust off there. Again, it'd be really handy to have some kind of like dedicated workspace for the stained glass stuff, but that's a someday thing. I think the funniest part about the stained glass is this is honestly kind of my favorite part, because you just I don't know how to explain it, but the tedious parts of this is actually kind of the most fun. You're just in the shop, you're just I don't know, making zinc dust, I guess. The glass part is not super fun because you're really having to take the time there to fit things up fairly precisely. Here you're really just kind of, I don't know, it's like cutting a bunch of small pieces on the miter saw. It's actually a very easy thing to do, and not a ton of accuracy required in it. But again, take this all as someone who doesn't actually really know what they're doing. Quite literally making this up as I go along. So take my advice. Don't take my advice. I probably wouldn't trust me fully. In a few months or so, I might be able to actually give some good advice once I've done a few projects with this stuff. But for now, anyway, I'm just offering lessons based on what I've learned in the shop so far. And honestly, I'm hoping, like, one of the things I have found kind of interesting is the more that I do this, kind of the faster that I do get at it. Like, I mean, that's basically everything that everyone has ever said about whatever the job they do. But the thing with the, making this, like my first stained glass window that I made, even with like the zinc stuff, which is, a much easier way of working, it took me forever because I was trying to be way too accurate with things. I was trying to be, trying to get absolutely perfect precision to everything. It took forever, and just trying to figure out how to cut it and fit things and all that.